Hello, and thanks for tuning into Insights Questrom. We are ordinarily talking to Questrom professors and staff about what they have going on in the world of business, economics, and finance. But occasionally, a really exciting alum enters the stage. And today we have Professor Richard Devaney, who is an alumnus of Questrom, as well back when it was the Boston University School of Business, and soon to be the recipient of a Thinkers 50 Lifetime Achievement Award for his work in management theory. Thinkers 50 is a thought leadership organization dedicated to recognizing and honoring those folks who have made significant contributions to management theory. And that's what Professor Devaney has done, in addition to his long career in the management world, where he started out in Massachusetts politics, has been teaching for 3 decades at Dartmouth College's Tuck School of Business, authored numerous books, and was actually called upon by the American War College to develop some of his ideas for the Indo-Pacific Command as they gamed out strategies for dealing with China. So it's a long and illustrious career. Oh, and along the way, he was the advisor to several folks, CEOs in the Fortune 500 world as well. So a long and illustrious career. We're really appreciative to him for taking the time to talk today. And Professor Devaney, I just want to say thank you again for your time. And before we even really get into it, I got to say, normally business takes ideas from the military, but it's not often to see the military go to take ideas from the business world. But some of the ideas you had on competition, which we're going to get into in a second, were actually commissioned by the Indo-Pacific Command for applicability to a real-life combat situation. So that must have been a pretty cool experience.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for having me on your program. I'm very excited to be here. I haven't been to BU for a very long time. I think the last time I was there was when I graduated in 1979. And so I'm more than happy to help the school, and will note how great the school has become compared to what I had at BU. I just went and had classes, and there was no central building, there was no name, there was really not a lot of connectivity to the school built up then. Sure. And now all of that has changed, and I'm so happy to see that, and I'm glad to be this small of a point, make this small of a contribution to help the alumni of the school.
That's very kind of you to say, and I do think you'd find it's changed a lot since then, but I think it's wonderful to see that even folks who graduated back before some of the newer advances that Questrom has made, and even before it was Questrom, could still go on to do great things. And that's actually what we're here to talk to you today about. I would say the first thing that you really focused on was competitive theory, and it, as far as I understand in your book, Hypercompetition, really helped pave the way for a new way of thinking about competitive advantage, and that's what really put you on the map in terms of the management theory world. So if you don't mind, I'd love to start, with that first big break in your career, competitive theory and your theories about hypercompetition, your book about it. Maybe for the folks listening, you could tell us a bit about how you came to the ideas you had, what they were, and what their impact was.
I wrote a book called Hypercompetition back in 1994, I guess it was published. And that book summarized a radically different approach to strategy from, for example, the Harvard Business Model. The Harvard Business Model asked you to reduce rivalry, build barriers to entry, and barriers to substitutes, and that was supposed to create a strong long-term competitive advantage. I explored in my book the issue of what happens if the environment is so volatile that you can't maintain anything that's sustainable, and that you have to live just with short-term advantages. The result of that exploration led me to a theory of strategy which basically took advantage of the traditional strategy from the Harvard Business School. And so instead of building barriers, you have to go around them, go underneath them, merge things together so that the barriers disappear. In terms of rivalry, you have to increase the rivalry through innovation and through other disruptive means that undermine the five forces and create an environment where oligopolists and industry leaders are undermined. So the bottom line was, I took on the heavy hitters, and back in 1993 with a different level of strategy, or a different view of strategy, which people kind of made fun of at the beginning. And today you look at it, almost nobody uses oligopoly theory as a basis of strategy. And today everybody's talking about disruption. When I brought up that term, it was much earlier than some of the people that lay claim to it, like Clay Christensen. And I was kind of thrust into a game that I have to say I was not very prepared for at the time.
You didn't realize you'd be upsetting the apple cart that much.
Well, I did think that, but I had no idea just how much it was going to have a practical impact. I thought it'd just be a war of words in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it did kind of put you on the map in terms of management theory. It caught a lot of people's attention. As we talked about, it caught the attention of the American War College, which isn't known for combing through, Harvard Business Review or other materials like that. But you didn't stay focused on competition. You followed that up a few years later with an examination of industrial policy and manufacturing, specifically something you called additive manufacturing. Maybe you could tell us a bit about your contributions in that space as well. My
last book was on 3D printing and how it would change the nature of manufacturing. And what I came to a conclusion of was that 3D printing was going to create rules of competition that were much like, that were the opposite of the traditional assumptions about manufacturing. Instead of long supply chains, it would make short ones. Instead of economies of scale, it would create the opportunity for economies of scope without scale. And so a lot of the general principles of Ford's theory of manufacturing kind of disappeared. So I wrote a book about how these rules were all going to change, and what the manufacturing sector would look like in the future, as well as how it affected policy and society and politics, geopolitics. And I wrote it up in terms of a competitive method vis-a-vis the Chinese.
And these were some of the ideas that, as we mentioned, got you noticed in boardrooms, in not just the US, but around the world, where you ended up talking and being an advisor to, Fortune 500, Fortune 10 companies, also the American military, as we discussed. But that wasn't your sole focus. You were also, throughout this whole time, and still remain, a professor of strategy at Tuck at Dartmouth College, where you are kind of known. I got to mention this, Professor Devaney, you're kind of known for a particular analogy that folks really always get a kick out of, and that is, applying management theory, business theory to the Godfather. So if you don't mind, for those of us who who don't have the benefit of being your students in the classroom, would you mind just sharing a little bit about how you kind of take the Godfather, apply it to management theory, and use that as a metaphor for what you see in the business world?
Well, the Godfather ends up, when you analyze it, see through all the actions, it ends up to be with the Godfather veto using the rules of oligopoly, the old rules. And Michael Corleone, he is using hypercompetition. So that's the big picture, is we have two styles, one of which ends up defeated and falling apart, which was vetoes. As the world changed and the people came in with the drug industry, and they wanted to have non-geographic structures, which was the old way of organizing. Each Godfather would get a different borough in New York City, and they wouldn't tread on each other's terms.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did, then they went to the commission, and the commission decided, how do you resolve that? So the overall picture here was that a disruptive strategy that undermined the oligopoly. If you remember the famous scene where the baptism takes place and all the heads of the 5 families are destroyed, you realize that Michael Corleone is the real master.
And I think the way you mentioned it when we were talking earlier was it also just changed the business dynamic of how the mob worked from one focused on turf to one focused, as you said, with the drug trade on supply chains and on suppliers and vendors and clientele and customer bases, as opposed to physical turf. Is that kind of a fair summary as well?
I completely agree with you. Yeah. It's that summarizes the big picture. And then you watch almost every one of the actions that take place there about Michael trying to go into gambling casinos, which could be taken into legitimate forms over time, which was a great wish of his father. And Michael didn't quite get there by the end of the 3rd movie, but then the 3rd movie was so incompetently done that they deserved killing off Vito's vision.
I love it, and I always get a kick out of professors who are able to take highly complex or theoretical or what may seem to the layperson esoteric topics and apply them to, media or analogies or examples in real life that, anybody can understand and get. And I think that's a great one. So thanks for sharing that. The last thing I really wanted to talk to you about, Professor Devaney, was, we talked about this at the beginning a little bit. You are a Questrom alum, even before it was known as Questrom, Boston University School of Management, 79, and that really was your start to a really long and illustrious and exciting career in the world of management theory. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you have any memories of your time at Boston University or anything special about your studies there that really you think helped pave the way for your future success? Anything that you think is worth mentioning? Any advice you want to pass on to students or prospective students who are looking at Questrom right now?
I have a very good memory of my strategy classes with Professor Henry Morgan and with Professor Andrew Kerr. And these 2 professors excited me, got me motivated to think more about strategy. And I originally had planned, when I was graduating from BU, was to be a tax accountant. And when I graduated, I went off to Coopers and Lybrand and was a tax accountant for long enough time to generate what I wanted to do. So these 2 professors kind of shook up my world and derailed my plan because they were so good and so interesting. It was my first introduction to Michael Porter's theories from Harvard Business Review. They had all kinds of other cases that just I could imagine myself teaching. And so 3 years after getting out of BU, I quit my job at Coopers and Lybrand and then went back to school and got a PhD so that I could become a professor of strategy. And there I've been for 36 years now, and I've loved every moment of what I did, and never regretted the decision that to change careers. And in fact, I've almost every day thanked those two professors, even though they've passed away, or at least Henry Morgan is. And I thank them every day for the inspiration that led me to this career. Without them, I never would have considered it.
It really is amazing how, the right professor at the right time in your life, or the right mentor, I should say, it doesn't even have to be an educator, can really just change the whole trajectory of your life, isn't it? I'm glad you met them at Boston University, and I'm hopeful that folks listening to this, especially if they're just starting out in their careers, are keeping their eyes and their ears open for who that mentor figure can be for them to really help them in terms of figuring out what they want to do with their Questrom education going forward. So, Professor Devaney, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations again on your Lifetime Achievement Award from Thinkers of 50, which again is not for any one particular body of work that you've produced, although you've produced a lot, but for the entire sum of everything you've been doing the past 3 decades plus. It really has made a big impact on the world of management theory. And it's really, I'm sure, given a lot of students who pass through your classroom at Tuck a lot to think about and work with as they set off on their own careers. So thank you again. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. Your alma mater, Questrom, certainly appreciates everything you've done to contribute to the student life and the intellectual faculty leadership here at Questrom. So thank you again. Yeah. And we'll hopefully hear from you after you collect your award.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. And for your audience, remember, hold your friends close, but your enemies closer.
I love it.